Alright, so ladies, gentlemen, fellow Kryptonians out there, welcome to my spoiler breakdown and review for James Gunn Superman. So full warning, as you can probably tell, this is going to be a long video as I'm going to try my best to cover all of the biggest talking points that, I think you would want me to dive into from a spoiler review. And despite the video length though, I might somehow not be able to cover every single last detail. I know, how? I don't know. But more on that at the very end of this video with another video that I have planned for you guys later on next week. But either way, it's all going to be timestamped just for the various topics that we cover in this spoiler breakdown. One thing I will say, just with making a spoiler-free review and then a spoiler review, at least for me, is that I don't necessarily want to end up repeating my thoughts, running through the exact same approach as I did in my first video. So if you want my overall comprehensive kind of straight-up review thoughts on Superman, I still absolutely recommend checking out my first video for just some stuff that I may not cover here. But it goes without saying, I will be dying to hear your thoughts on everything that I touch on in this video down in the comments below. So please do get involved. I know this has been a bit of a rambly intro, so thanks for staying with me. The only other thing that I'm going to ask of you is if you could spare a like, that would really go a long way. It takes ages to edit one of these videos, so thank you for showing your support on the channel. And if you happen to be brand new here, consider subscribing because, the DCU is just getting started. So first of all, I felt like it was good to kind of revisit how do I feel about the overall plot of Superman, having seen it twice now that I can talk about spoilers. Do I think that it's done a good job at being the launching point of the DCU? So I will have to say absolutely. Don't get me wrong, just like I said in my no spoiler review, this movie isn't flawless. And it's got some issues that we will dive into a bit later on in this video, but crucially, the movie has so many great qualities to it that quite frankly needed to be achieved in order to start this universe off well. That just kind of overall left me with the feeling that it was an absolute blast of a time. Now, I think it's needless to say that James Gunn's Superman is arguably the most important DC movie we've had in a very long time, possibly in forever, and there really is no understating that. And even though it's received some negative reviews to mixed reviews, it is clear that there is a huge majority of people who still had a blast, maybe you watching here right now, and that was the most important thing to accomplish. Now, as for the plot, this is where we're going to dive into all kinds of directions with some things that happened with what was revealed, and there's quite a few things. But to start with, the plot for Superman is pretty simple if you think about it. Simple but effective. Superman has been active for 3 years in Metropolis, and he's very popular among the people. And Lex Luthor can't stand that. Now, the events of the movie pick up with Superman having recently stopped a war in Boravia, and there's certain ramifications that come with that on all sides politically. And surprise, surprise, we learn that Lex Luthor is behind everything. It's very clear throughout the plot that Lex wants to take down Superman, but he also understands that the very thing he's resentful about, with people loving Superman, he needs to have an approach to taking him down that the government and even his supporters could at least understand. And that's why we see that Luthor has been supplying, over 80 billion worth of arms to Boravia to fuel their war with Jahanpur. This then gives Luthor the opportunity to present Planet Watch at that meeting with the government officials in an effort to get their support in officially taking Superman down, or at least, bringing him in for questioning. So all that's to say is I really enjoyed the way that they got into that, with even General Rick Flag mentioning at this point that it was naive but well-intentioned with Supes trying to stop the war, but with Luthor trying to sow the seeds of doubt and saying, I don't know the intentions of an unintended fire hose, I just do what I can to not be splashed. So there is undeniable concern there for the higher-ups, let alone the concern that's introduced with Jor-El's message, but more on that in a few moments. So all in all, for Lex's motivations in Gunn's Superman, it's crystal clear and absolutely a believable and I would say good foundation for their first true conflict in this iteration of the characters. Gunn also still roots in other aspects of Lex's character that I felt was very very important to do, such as, when Superman simply asks why, when Luthor reveals all to him towards the end of the movie, and Luthor's response is, because you're destroying us. So the characterization of Luthor and the catalyst for this whole plot that was delved into in these scenes were done so well, because Lex doesn't just want to take down Superman merely because I hate Superman. There's a deeper rooted hatred there in the comics and with what Gunn brings to life here, and where Lex is very aware that envy consumes his every waking moment. Lex gets offended enough when people mention Galileo or Einstein in the same breath as him, but at least, they did something. At least they weren't some dopey illusion catapulted onto this planet just to have the world fawn over him. Now, again, as a Lex Luthor fan, and if you've watched my videos getting into what I think Lex's motivations will be in this movie, hearing this stuff was just music to my ears. And I know I already went over performances in my other review, but just to slam it down again, Nicholas Hoult did such a great job here in portraying that hatred for Superman, and it was important for me, for Gunn to highlight Lex Luthor's just hubris in the ways that he did. But with that being the core narrative for Luthor in the film, Luthor, and this is where things get interesting, Luthor also manages to find other ways to make Superman look bad to the people of Earth, which in turn, with not only dealing with the backlash from the Bravian military conflict, he also has to deal with the corrupted message from his Kryptonian parents being recovered by the Engineer that introduces another inner turmoil for Superman that he has to come to terms with. So, with that being said, what did I think of the recovered message that revealed a certain twist about Superman's Kryptonian parents, Jor-El and Lara-El? And just a little refresher of the message here, just to kind of hammer it in. So, we love you more than heaven, our son. We love you more than land. Our beloved home is soon to be gone forever, but hope vitalizes our hearts, and that hope is you, Kal-El. We have searched the universe for a home where you can do the most good and live out Krypton's truth. That place is Earth. Then, the rest of the message plays. The people there are simple and profoundly confused, weak of mind and spirit and body, lord over the planet as the last son of Krypton. Dispatch of anyone unable or unwilling to serve you, Kal-El. Take as many wives as you can, so your genes and Krypton's might and legacy will live on in this new frontier. Do us proud, our beloved son. Rule without mercy. And it's kind of like, well, okay, well, that's a lot to take in. So I have to say, when I first heard this in the leaks quite a while back now, it's kind of hard to avoid. I thought, okay, I would ideally like it to not be the case. And I will say that my preference here is to have a Jor-El who sends his son, Kal-El, to Earth, with the motivation being that in addition to obviously saving their son's life before Krypton explodes, hopefully one day he can also help out humanity. Now, with that being said, the more I contemplated it, the more I came round to the concept of that leak. Don't get me wrong, the former is still my preference, but as I always say here on the channel, adaptations don't copy and paste, and not to mention, this is not the first time in Superman iterations across all forms in where the House of El has been taken out of what you could say is traditional canon. For me, over time, just pondering the leak, I kind of began thinking to myself that, well, I can't imagine that Gunn is going to do a Zod in the DCU after having Zod in the last iteration of a DC cinematic universe. Obviously, I don't know what the future holds, but I just doubt that we're going to have the whole Zod wanting to take over Earth to restore Krypton kind of thing as just this next installment of a story for David Corenswet Superman. And I say all of that because initially I had thought upon hearing this leak, well, what's the difference between Jor-El and Zod at this point? So, that kind of does somewhat rub you the wrong way as a fan of traditional Superman canon. So on that note, I think it is important to point out that I can understand why some of you listening right now may have that same knee-jerk reaction. But then, as you lean more into what Gunn was going for with just the plot of this movie, I think that if you took that message being exposed from the plot out, it perhaps would have made Superman's personal journey a lot less interesting. So sure, like you would have had the whole Baravian military conflict being orchestrated by Lex Luthor in order to kill Superman, and all of that would have been cool and true of a Luthor plot to take place in a Superman film. But what internal true struggle for Clark would there have been other than trying to, I don't know, restore the optics of Superman's name to the public when it came to involving himself in the geopolitical affairs of Baravia and Jahanpur? So the whole ruling Earth thing was a crucial factor to his overall struggle in this film. So including the truth of this recording being exposed really just makes Clark completely second guess everything he's ever believed about himself when it, comes to his purpose in being sent to Earth. It just overall makes it a lot more of a existential contemplation for him. It also just further reinforces that fantastic scene we had with Pa Kent and his message of your actions, your choices, that's what makes you who you are. Obviously, Clark, having heard this true message from his Kryptonian parents, would never have made him all of a sudden flip his mind and start to lord over humanity, but it's still an internal struggle nevertheless that works well for the identity of the character in this movie. Because at the end of the day, this guy grew up very different to everyone else, to say the least. Like, he grew up like a human, among humans, and if you just consider for like a single second what it must have been like to grow up gaining these powers, and then as you get older, you wonder what your purpose was in being sent here by literal alien parents on an alien planet, which would have been an overwhelming truth to learn in of itself when that time came from Mara and Pa Kent, when they told him that many years ago, to then eventually one day you discover that you can create a Kryptonian fortress that also houses a hologram of your parents saying one half of that message, which sounded pretty positive. So it's like, okay, I feel a sense of like purpose and belonging now. Like, I don't know too much about them, but I know this. All while you would love to learn more about where you came from. Again, at least you had that. At least you knew that you could put your powers to good use. And it's a tragedy that Krypton is gone, but you find this new calling with what you can do to help better humanity. And then you learn that, the other half of the message. Now, again, I'm not saying it's incredible, and a lot of us prefer the original Jor-El kind of take and motivations being other than sending your son to Earth to survive, Krypton's destruction. Hey, let's see what he can do for humanity as well. But that doesn't make this one that Gunn has done an irrelevant change to explore. So when you adjust your thinking to that perspective with all that considered, it is something that I think I'm fine with in a new iteration of Superman. Now, to acknowledge some other things with the Jor-El message, I know some people are saying, but what if? After all of this, the message was still fake, despite 28 of the world's top linguists confirming the translations and the top forensic computer techs confirming the validity of the footage. I mean, I have to say they did it pretty quickly. The engineer still doctored the message to serve Lex Luthor's agenda. Honestly, to everyone saying that, I'll say no. I don't think that is the case at all. I don't think Gunn would introduce this in the movie to maintain its truth throughout the entire whole plot as a pivotal thing at play for Superman to have to reconcile with, right? Right to the credits rolling on screen, to then one day just be like, well, nope. It turns out it's not true. I honestly think Gunn's way of rejecting that theory was through having Mr. Terrific, the genius himself, immediately shutting down the idea of the second half of the message being doctored, with him saying to Clark, I'm so sorry, man, but there's no way this message is fake. Now, obviously, that doesn't technically eliminate the speculation, but I do truly feel like that was Gunn's attempt at trying to cement that this other half of the message is the truth of the matter. Now, I get why people suggest this, but to be honest, I think it's coming from a place of hoping that it isn't true rather than just believing the reality that this is the canon of this iteration. I mean, I'll hold my hands up, truly, if I'm wrong in the future, but I do just think that this is what Gunn wanted to do. Now, on another note, I absolutely love the presentation of Jor-El and Lara, though. I think Bradley Cooper and Angela Serafian, I believe, looked incredible as these characters, and I really loved the elegant costume design that they have. I mean, not to mention the Kryptonian language sounded really elegant, you could say. And I would love to see more of them, but at the same time, I don't know if we're going to. But I suppose never say never. This now brings me to Ultraman, of whom is another factor to the plot against Superman, as he was like clearly the avatar for Luthor to be able to physically combat Superman. So I think given everything we've covered for a long time on the channel, and to be honest, even if I didn't run this YouTube channel and cover it, that it was always, you know, incredibly likely the case that his character would be a clone of Superman. So all while I enjoyed this character, and, you know, as much as I get called a freaking shill on this channel, to be transparent here, I was kind of like, eh? And all I mean by that is, I think we can all agree that it's not like Ultraman was this rich character with all of this depth to him. So I'm kind of just left thinking that he was just here throughout the movie, and the character itself wasn't exactly a standout for me, and I don't think that's an unreasonable take to have. It doesn't mean that I didn't enjoy the awesome action scenes we had between Ultraman and Superman when he faced him, but this brings me to Ultraman's end in the film, where I'm kind of in a couple of minds about the way he was defeated. So when Superman was fighting Ultraman and Lex was revealing how cloning him was relatively simple after locating a strand of his hair from previous battles, we have Superman get Krypto to destroy all of the Luthor Corp drones, so Ultraman couldn't hear any instructions on what to do. Anyway, this final moment of Ultraman's defeat has caused a little bit of debate among some fans, and I do want to say that I don't think that this is a disingenuous criticism, as I do think that there is absolutely something to be explored here with how I think they could have still handled things a little bit differently. Now, having said that, I do want to say, I know some people, when they hear a critique of a movie they just loved, they instantly disregard the take as, oh, that's nitpicky, or it doesn't even matter. But honestly, on the contrary, I love this movie, and I think if you're here for a frickin' review, it's important to try and discuss all of the good things and some of the potential drawbacks in the most level-headed ways that we can. So I guess all of that is to say, hear me out here. So we get to the point in the movie where Superman is basically getting wrecked by Ultraman as they're right next to the black hole, and then we see Superman observe this massive bus, or whatever it is, on its way down to the black hole at a very rapid pace. I mean, after all, it's getting sucked in. We see Superman literally look at it, so clearly identifying this as an opportunity to defeat Ultraman, and he musters all of his strength to toss Ultraman over the edge right in time to get into the bus's path in order for the bus to absolutely smash on top of Ultraman and thus propel him into the black hole. So there's a couple of things here, and some people have an issue with Superman doing this because the question is, you know, did he kind of just kill Ultraman? Now, first of all, hold your horses. Let me just say this right out the gate with this point that we're getting into, that yes, I hear some of you guys already saying it, no, this might not have killed Ultraman. Like, I hear you, and I fully take that into account. In fact, I really dig quite a lot of the speculation in how, what if because of that black hole that originated from Lex's artificially created pocket dimension, in turn, it doesn't kill you, but it sends you to a whole new unknown pocket dimension or to an in-between universal space in where Ultraman doesn't die. It's that speculation which is completely valid and could be true, as it's a matter of fact that we don't know for an absolute certainty that if you went through that black hole, that it couldn't somehow lead to some of those ideas simply being true. But what I also want to stress, and this is one of the main points of this, is that I think it's a fair and logical assessment to say that Superman, the character himself in that moment, did not know that he would be sent somewhere as an absolute certainty, right? So Superman doesn't know where that black hole leads, or whether if it does lead to another place, or if it kills you, which, after all, to further add context to this point, is the very reason as to why Superman, alongside Baby Joey and Metamorpho and Krypto, were desperately trying to fly their way out of there. Because after all, right, like, it's reasonable to assume that those characters were kind of maybe assuming that they could perhaps die if they went into the black hole. The underlying criticism therefore lies in that through Superman knowingly sending Ultraman into this black hole, he was comfortable enough with the idea that it could have potentially killed him. And therefore, the criticism that I've heard some people say is, well, isn't that a contradiction to the clear moral compass that James Gunn established for this version of the character? Or that, you know, well, this Superman will save a squirrel, but he'll do something to Ultraman that wouldn't be unreasonable to assume that it could possibly kill him. But I also understand those who say, but it doesn't matter because Superman didn't have a choice. I think that response is open to more debate, because one could argue that he could have bested Ultraman physically if he really didn't want him to die, especially with those Lex drone bot things out the way, with him no longer receiving instruction. Technically, surely this dumbed down Superman clone would be a lot easier for Superman to best. You know, like, he's not receiving the predictive moves in where he can absolutely bash Superman in. Now, I know that this would have led to the fight scene going on for a lot longer, which may not have served the movie's pacing well. So obviously there's other factors that go into this cutting off at this point in the movie. But there's also people saying, well, he is a clone. It's not exactly a proper human life, so it doesn't matter. Again, I think that argument can be challenged as well. Ultraman he's not a robot. So he may not be very intelligent, but he is still a being made up of flesh and blood and organs and a freaking brain, so on and so forth. So all I'm trying to spell out for everyone here is that there is valid criticism in this whole topic being raised. But beyond any of that for me, I think where my take lies with the whole ending with Ultraman, after defeating Ultraman here, the movie doesn't, for the rest of its runtime, take even a single moment to check in with what's happened there, or have any of the characters such as Superman himself acknowledge what he did. It just kind of moved right on to the next thing. So for example, maybe just slightly adding another layer to Ultraman, and where that was lacking in this movie, as we mentioned earlier with, I don't know, what if Ultraman was sick of being this puppet and decided to go into the black hole himself out of a rejection of Lex Luthor, as his existence wasn't exactly much of one anyway. Sure, that's not a fully fleshed out idea here, and it would have even been quite a tropey play for one of the villains or Muscle to abandon their post in protest, so to speak, but maybe, let's say, if they had Luthor repeatedly treat Ultraman like crap in the plot, like he did with Eve Teschmacher in the movie, through throwing that pencil at her and then just calling Ultraman utterly stupid, and especially after everything this clone, this Ultraman, has done to fulfill his creator's wishes, you know, that could have been one way to solve this criticism. Also, I believe it might have been effective to see that after Superman physically beats Ultraman, let's say Ultraman is on the edge of that crack by the black hole and looks back, and Clark notices what he's about to do. This is when Clark desperately tries to fly to him lightning fast to not even so much as let this clone die, which would have, further highlighted how Gunn's Superman, yes, not only, doesn't want to let a squirrel die, but he refuses to even let a clone who's been trying to kill him die because he's casting himself into oblivion. But then, alas, the scene plays out and he's sadly unable to prevent that from happening without also risking himself being swallowed into the black hole. Then as for just another idea, which goes back to the speculation that some of you guys have been getting into, let's say that after Lex was bested in the movie where Mr. Terrific successfully shuts down the black hole city cracking situation, at some point the movie could have perhaps took the time to include a scene where perhaps Mr. Terrific goes to Clark and says, hey, Clark, like after looking into the Luthor Corp systems, it appears that the black hole that was created leads to this other parallel dimension. The Luthor Corp techies encountered this anomaly a while ago in some of their earlier tests and have named it this Phantom Zone or something. I don't know. I'm not saying my suggestion there is perfect, perhaps far from it. My only point is that I feel like it would have been beneficial to the movie to acknowledge the situation that just happened. Sure, it wouldn't have eliminated Clark doing what he did regardless of not knowing if sending Ultraman into the black hole would have killed him or not, but it would have at least acknowledged the situation rather than, okay, that kind of pretty serious thing just happened. Let's just move on and never talk about it again. But hey, for all I know, Ultraman may still make a return one day. I know some people are dead set on that and how maybe he'll be Bizarro, but even for me, despite everything I've covered here, I'll just choose to believe that Ultraman is still out there somewhere, even if I don't necessarily think that we'll be seeing him again. And I think also that could have been Gunn's potential nod at through sending Ultraman into a black hole, that he would be going into another reality in where in the comics, Ultraman is literally a alternate reality Superman, an evil Superman. Now, I don't think that this Ultraman would be going into another universe and pretending to be, a Superman, an evil one, but I just think it's Gunn's nod that maybe it could have sent him somewhere else, thus giving a nod to that comic book origin. But anyway, though, with all of that ramble out the way with regards to Ultraman and how I felt like his ending was handled, I know me even discussing that is going to alienate some people, but I feel like there's some conversation there worthy of criticism and worthy to be just talked about. By no means, I do want to emphasize this as well, does it really weigh down the movie for me in a massive way? Because as I keep maintaining here with my thoughts on the movie, it has so many other redeeming qualities to it, which make it a blast of a time. I just feel like perhaps implementing some of those ideas into the plot would have resulted in something that makes just a bit more sense to the story that was at play, and also had just some of the other characters be a smidge more compelling. Okay, so now going back to the plot with the ending, of course we have Lex Luthor heading to Belle Reve. Now it makes me wonder what could be next for the character, because it has been said, we cannot forget this, that Lex Luthor will play a major role in the DCU, and they said not only in the Superman movie, and Peter Safran said that himself. So maybe he can hire a very good lawyer, or perhaps if things one day lead into a Legion of Doom place, Lex could just break out. But I think Lex usually likes to get back on the outside in a legal way, a very shady legal way, but a legal, jammy way nonetheless. And to be honest though, I would have no idea how he would do that given all the things that he's been pinned for. But it's not usually his style to just be on the run, so to speak, if he can help it. So we're going to have to wait and see where that goes, but with more resentment now than ever for Superman, I can easily see him organizing further stages to his plan from Belle Reve. And for all we know, it could be in small steps to a much larger overarching plan that could unfold across the projects of the DCU. But if you guys have any theories to that, and we can get more into that in my discussion series episode next week, let me know down in the comments below. Now, this leads me to my next topic of conversation, as it all kind of leans into the movie's short runtime and just other aspects that are affected as a result of it perhaps needing to be a bit longer. So if there's one critique that I think I've heard most from people, it's that despite how packed the movie was in all of these entertaining ways, plenty of people seem to agree that the movie just would have likely have benefited from going from 1 hour and 58 minutes, without credits that is, to something more like 2 hours 15 minutes, 2 hours 20 minutes. And because it just does, quite frankly, leave some things, characters, and potential further exploration of various things to the wayside, such as characters that were underutilized with, the Daily Planet crew, where there's absolutely no way that there wasn't some more scenes with Ron Troop. Like, did Ron even have a line? Then there's Steve Lombard. I just feel like quite a bit was probably left on the cutting room floor there. And then, of course, when it comes to the Justice Gang, as much as I praised them in my no spoiler review, and I think a lot of people, including myself, were happy to see that they in no way encroached on Superman's screen time in the movie, but rather, as James Gunn said, they helped tell Superman's story and that side to his life. Overall, like I've said this a lot and I'll say it again, I really, really enjoyed the Justice Gang. Eddie Gathegi's Mr. Terrific was an absolute standout in the movie, to the point of where I keep seeing people now say that we, without a doubt, need to see more of him. Guy Gardner, well, now there's takes left, right, and center saying, Nathan Fillion, I'm sorry I ever doubted you, because people are realizing that he really did bring the character of Guy Gardner to life to a T. But as for Hawkgirl, there just really wasn't much there at all. Now, I want to stress again here, yes, I understand that the movie is about Superman. I'm not arguing otherwise, but if this movie had a longer runtime, like even merely 15 minutes, we could have perhaps had those scenes that we were very pleased with from Mr. Terrific and Guy Gardner, but also put on to Hawkgirl as well. Sure, you know, we'll see more of her in the future of the DCU. I'm very confident about that. We already know she's briefly in Peacemaker, but it's just, all I'm saying is that I'd like to think most people are in agreement that with a longer runtime, she could have been utilized better in the movie. The same can absolutely be said for the Engineer. A longer runtime would have allowed us to lean more into her motivation, since, you know, all we had in the film was a droplet of what that was when Luthor said in the Fortress of Solitude that nothing has felt right since he showed up. And the Engineer responds, I know, Lex, I've sacrificed my own humanity to help get rid of it. And it's kind of like, okay, but why? Sure, this could imply that this iteration of the character, like she may have had some trauma in the past, which involves metahumans, that also led to her just kind of putting all metahumans into one box. Now again, this movie isn't called The Engineer, but to point it out again, if this movie seriously was only 15 or 20 minutes longer, which it really does feel like it originally was, there could have been a tidbit more peppered in there for characters like this, despite their introduction in Superman also likely being intended to perhaps use them again further down the line of the DCU. I don't think that excuses like only touching the surface level of them in this movie, if you even want to call it that. Regardless though, as I already said in my other video, I thought she was really interesting, and I think Maria Gabriela de Faria did a stellar job. Like, she was really badass, and I really enjoyed the scene of Superman being affected by her nanotech to the point of where he almost pretty much died. Like, that was some crazy stuff. Seeing Superman vulnerable like this is one of the unique points of this movie. And I guess, you know, one comment that I've just seen a lot of people say is that ultimately things felt a bit shortchanged in that department. Like, damn, it would have been cool to see more Perry White. Or another one I keep seeing people say that I forgot to mention in my spoiler-free review is Clark Kent himself. I absolutely agree. I know I'm beating a dead horse at this point with this kind of criticism, but this criticism is more born out of love for the movie and just wanting to see more from these characters that I really enjoyed. Now, this doesn't mean, I do want to stress as well, that the movie doesn't work, because clearly people are still coming out of this enjoying it with the final cut that they made. But I do feel very confident in saying that if it did have this longer runtime, it would have resulted in what would have been very valuable results in fleshing things out a bit more, allowing some things to breathe in the same way that great Pa Kent scene did. And on that note, briefly, if we did have a bit longer runtime, that would have allowed it to have also addressed some things that just weren't really acknowledged or were just kind of moved on from quite rapidly, in where you would have thought that maybe they would have addressed it again at some point. So an example of this would be actually going back to the Jor-El message being exposed. So at the end of the movie, we know that Lex's lies and plans were all exposed to the world, and Superman is more or less being accepted again. But it's important to remember that the Jor-El message was still completely true. Sure, the people all learned that Lex planned all of these things in order to be able to kill Superman. But those doubts could still be present in people's minds, right? So maybe we could have had a scene of Superman speak to the press after Lex was bested, such as that moment where he reunites with Lois at the end on that street. And as the movie winds down to the ending, he could have just addressed that controversy of him being sent to Earth to rule. People of the world would have wanted to have seen him tackle and voice that publicly, and that could have been a sweet scene of resolution to have. And I have no doubt that off-screen, the characters probably do that. But do you see what I mean there? That there are some things like this and other aspects I aforementioned that the film doesn't really address again, where I would argue that it's understandable for how it could have been a good thing for them to do so. Now, one thing to touch on as well before we kind of nerd out over some of the other interesting reveals, such as Supergirl and the Metahuman Mural, is kind of going into the tone and humor of the movie once again here, because now I can talk a little bit more about that from my spoiler-free review with spoilers after all. Now, I don't want to repeat myself so much from my spoiler-free review, but this is something I kept seeing people talk about as well in the comments section and just online in general. And if you watched that previous video of mine, you'd know that I enjoyed the humor in this film. You know, at this point, I'm very familiar with James Gunn's work, from the Guardians movies to the Suicide Squad, and then, of course, Peacemaker. And I knew that with this Superman embracing the more goofy, all-out fantastical Silver Age tone of the character, that Gunn would introduce consistent laughs throughout the film, most of which landed, and I really don't have an issue with at all, and actually thoroughly enjoyed. But also, having said that, I do absolutely agree that while I enjoyed a lot of this in the movie, people are pointing out that it would have been nice to have one or two more scenes in the film that were allowed to breathe in the same way that the Pa Kent scene did. Now, an example of this would be that final moment between Lex Luthor and Superman, where Lex is just absolutely going off at Superman. We have that powerful speech from Superman himself, more or less surmising the portrayal of this character that Gunn wanted to do, with him saying that this is where you've always been wrong about me, Lex. So you have all of this great drama unfolding, this confrontation happening. You have Lex hammering down with complete and utter conviction, spitting it all right back in Superman's face, saying that none of this matters. The government gave me the authority to kill you, if not today. And the scene is all tense and epic, and then boom, Krypto comes storming in. Everyone freaks out. Luthor is screaming as Krypto is munching on him and flying him about and bashing him over the place. And look, let me make this very clear. I've got mixed feelings on this point, because I also enjoyed the comedic choice here and just overall enjoyed the scene. However, I use this moment as an example because it's really a perfect example of one of the several moments in the movie where a scene like this, which is going somewhere, has kind of the rug just pulled out from under it for Gunn to implement a funny moment. So with the Pa Kent scene, you obviously don't have that, and that was great. It felt good, it felt earnest and special and sentimental and sincere. And if anything, again, not knocking on the other jokes and stuff that I enjoyed in the movie, because I enjoyed them, but if anything, refreshing, given the levity weaved into a lot of the other scenes in the movie. And this overall scene at the end was just great. Like, you had that epic moment from Superman voicing what makes him who he is at the culmination of all of this story. You have Nicholas Hoult at the top of his game, clapping back, and to let that play out as well would have felt pretty epic, for lack of a better word there. Now, of course, some of you may disagree with that, and I wouldn't even blame you, because as I said, I don't entirely disagree, as I enjoyed the scene. But even if you do completely disagree there, I just hope that you can see my point, that all while we're perhaps on the same page with enjoying Gunn's humor choices in scenes throughout this movie, perhaps one or two other scenes in the movie, given that same slowing down treatment, not disrupted with, admittedly, a funny moment, would have just been would have been nice and a little bit more balanced. Alright, so up next, after getting into all the strengths and somewhat drawbacks of those bigger moments in the movie, let's now take a break from that and talk about the Metahuman Mural. So this is something I was excited about seeing in the movie ever since Gunn spoke about it before the release date. He said that he was excited about releasing images of this Metahuman mural to the public, and I mean, so was I, because we knew before going into the film that the mural details the history of metahumans in the DCU. And while I didn't want to get ahead of myself, I was excited at the potential of what we could see there, since metahumans have been around in public for at least 300 years. Now, I saw a lot of you say that you didn't spot the mural. Well, if you didn't and you're going to see the movie again, it is in the Hall of Justice. It's kind of on the wall where they altered the existing mural at the Cincinnati Museum Center. So this is when Lois goes to the Justice Gang to seek help on saving Superman from the pocket dimension. The camera doesn't always give you a good look at it, admittedly, and it goes quite a long way around the walls, and so to get some of those larger teasers out of it, it really is kind of hard, because it's kind of a blink and you'll miss it moment. But one thing I did see on the wall, ladies and gentlemen, oh my god, if you know me, you'll know that this made me super excited. We got to see characters from the Justice Society of America, such as Wildcat, and I think everyone agrees that Wildcat is like the first noticeable figure that you see. I think we could spot Jay Garrick's Flash there as well, as he's kind of getting ready to run on the ground, and then we kind of see him again further along the mural running. So it kind of plays a little bit out like a tapestry there. And I believe that there could also be Black Pirate, Vibe, Atomic Knight, Sandman, and there are other names being mentioned, because there's clearly a bunch of other characters. But to be honest here, guys, I'm just going to wait for the official images and then just break it down, because otherwise, it is quite a guessing game, as I know that there are some images going around online of people just having taken a picture during the movie or something, but you just can't quite call every single one of them 100% when you're dealing with a bloody kind of cam rip or whatever you want to call it. Now, the reason why I was hoping to see JSA characters in this mural is because I've said for a long time that after a few years of hopefully having a successful DCU and where they continue to make projects, so come 2029, 2030, or whenever, Gunn could turn around and announce a JSA project by saying, well, you know, you've seen a few projects now in the present day DCU like Superman, Lantern, Supergirl, Batman, Brave and the Bold. Now, it's time for us to announce a project that delves into the heroes of the past, to see a world in where heroes perhaps had a bit more superhero autonomy back then, a delve into the JSA who were present during World War II. Obviously, seeing JSA characters on the Metahuman mural in the Hall of Justice doesn't guarantee this whatsoever. I know that, but oh man, I feel like we could get something like that someday. And at the very least, I just adore how much this Metahuman mural injects into what is, after all, an already existing, living, breathing DCU that we're picking up with in this movie. Now, I can't wait to break down the mural for more details, like solid, firm details. I know some of you probably wanted an even bigger deep dive here, but honestly, we're just gonna have to wait until we get some good, decent pictures of it. But when we do, you guys know that I'll go off over it. So next up is, of course, Supergirl. So if you've been following me for a while, you should know that I have been absolutely expecting Supergirl at the end of this movie. I mean, after all, they kind of gave it away that Milly Alcock was in it, but I've been kind of really expecting it ever since Corenswet said much earlier on that Crypto is more of a foster situation. And when he said that, it was all but sure that she was going to appear because, you know, using that term means that Superman is looking after Crypto for someone else. With the way she crashed in drunk, I loved it. Now, I know some people are taking an issue with this, you know, saying stuff like, you know, it's such a gun juvenile thing to do to Supergirl / Kara. But I mean, okay, it's one thing if you don't like or don't have a preference for seeing this iteration of Supergirl, but it's literally comic book accurate. She is literally wearing her Supergirl suit, her comic accurate one from Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, which the Supergirl movie is based off, underneath that very same large coat, which she is also wearing in the comic. Likely right where she heads to right at the end of this movie after picking up Krypto. Because at the beginning of Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, she once again, as we learn from Superman at the end of the movie, heads off planet to drink as it's her 21st birthday. And this is where she runs into Ruthie. So I really do believe that her movie will pick up perhaps just minutes or hours after the end of Superman. And again, guys, I know I keep saying it, but it is very comic book accurate, as this version of Kara, after all that she's endured, after witnessing everyone she loves around her die, surviving the destruction of Krypton, but enduring the struggles of surviving on Argo City, which, my God, did they have struggles on that floating rock, which was a chip off of Krypton, which eventually led to her being sent to Earth. Now, let's just say she's got a lot of trauma there. So honestly, the story of Woman of Tomorrow, where Kara is at as of right now, and as we see her in live action, I completely understand it. In that story and the journey that unfolds, Kara begins to find herself and her purpose. And that's something I'm buzzing to see. But based on this scene alone, Milly Alcock looked absolutely incredible as the DCU Supergirl. I mean, we already saw from set photos that she was wearing the comic book accurate suit, but it was pretty blurry. But now seeing up close, I honestly have no complaints. With the little that we saw of her demeanor and just Milly Alcock's energy she brought to that brief comedic scene as Krypto flies smashing into her was not only funny, but it really did give you a sense of the energy she'll bring to Kara's personality. I mean, I don't know, man. I'm a big fan of it already, and I know that there's some out there who may not gel with this right away, but I would honestly recommend reading or looking up the Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow story to kind of get a good read on what this version of Kara has already been through and this version of Kara that we're getting. And I think you'll begin to reframe your perspective and really even dig how they've already introduced her in an awesome little scene that we got at the end of this movie. Now, of course, there were other cameos, such as Reve, which we fully expected. We've known about that for a long time, but that was really, really awesome to see. Peacemaker, that was pleasantly surprising. I should have put that one together, considering that we had Hawkgirl and Guy Gardner and Maxwell Lord in Peacemaker Season 2. Of course, that Gunn was going to find some way of putting Peacemaker in there, and I really enjoyed that. And my crowd, like both times, were definitely acknowledging that in a very positive way. Now, other details that we finally learned is what the heck that frickin' giant floating ball was in the sky outside of Clark's apartment. Now, Clark writes it off as, oh, that's just a dimensional imp. And the way that line was just so casually delivered, and, you know, the way the scene was all framed with Lois quite concerned about Clark and everything, I really loved it, because it just goes to show how many crazy things Superman has already experienced, likely on a weekly basis, to the point of where a dimensional imp is not really a huge deal, as we see Guy Gardner use a construct of a baseball bat smacking down on it, and Mr. Terrific and Hawkgirl are just doing their thing as well. Now, I don't mind that the Justice Gang were also handling this alone. Some people out there have issues with that, but, you know, when you have three pretty competent heroes there sorting out the problem, and I'm sure Superman also flew by and made sure that they're okay with it, especially when he was also busy trying to look for Krypto. That just made sense to me. To kind of call that out as a criticism kind of makes it seem like if Clark doesn't do something to help at any given moment when there's trouble around the world, at any waking hour or minute of the day when he's sleeping or whatever, then he's abandoning people. Now, I wouldn't view it like that, and I'm sure you wouldn't either, so I don't really view this like that at the same time, especially when you have three superheroes handling the situation. Now, we all know James Gunn loves Batmite, so could this be him trolling Metropolis? Maybe, but, you know, it's more likely Mr. Mxyzptlk. I probably butchered that, but I'm guessing it's him. I mean, we don't have a whole lot to go off, but it is kind of nuts how we were all like, so this is probably maybe a nod at Solaris or something else that Gunn is doing, but really, it was another day in the life of living in Metropolis where a dimensional imp is trolling the city. And it's not Superman's first time dealing with that. And I really liked that. Now, we've also had Superman inspire the Justice Gang, which was really awesome to see. I mean, to see Guy Gardner discussing in the Hall of Justice, not risking the beef between the US government and the Justice Gang by getting involved with helping save Superman, to then literally doing the very thing that Superman got a lot of heat for by crossing over into the war and preventing Bravia from starting a fully fledged war with Jahanpur, is quite a switch up. As Isabella Merced mentioned in an interview, that they all kind of had a coming to Jesus moment with saving these people, and through kind of breaking the somewhat rule book and just doing what they felt was right. I like how they included that line of Hawkgirl saying that was sick kind of thing, and Metamorpho being involved, his dynamic, albeit very brief, and I can attribute that to like not enough runtime like we went into earlier. We could have seen more behind his character, la-di-da-da, and all of that. It was great. It was great seeing them all together and enjoying themselves doing it. And that is Superman's impact. Like, even if you're under a corporate sponsorship and you might want to do things by the book, or you answer to someone like Maxwell Lord, maybe things are going to be a lot more open now with these heroes gaining more autonomy in the same way Superman has. And that reminds me of that scene right at the end with Rick Flag and one of the higher-ups in the government talking about how metahumans are the ones who really call the shots now, and that's something that's really dawning upon the powers that be. Now, there are so many other things that I would have liked to have touched on in this spoiler breakdown / review, but you guys know me. I can talk forever just about several things and still not get through everything. So what I'm gonna do is talk about some of the other things in a dedicated discussion series special spoiler breakdown episode where you guys ask me anything and everything about the Superman movie. Various thoughts or takes on it that I may not have addressed here, to larger or even more nuanced aspects that were teased in the film that can contribute to bigger talking points of the DCU, things that lead into theory discussion, you name it. Now, there is already a post on my community tab if you want to leave something there, but you can, of course, submit anything you want me to talk about in the comments of this video as well. But honestly, I think for now, in addition to everything I said in my spoiler-free review, those are the main things that I think I should have covered spoiler-wise. And my God, this video is a long-ass video. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you got this far, by the way, you are absolutely one of the real ones. That's insane that you're still watching and listening right now. If you are, and you were going to maybe leave a comment, with whatever comment you were going to post, add the hashtag DimensionalImp in your comments so I know that you're one of the real ones. And I would really appreciate a like on this video. Consider subscribing if you're brand new. There is lots more content to come. And the next discussion series video will be a lot more focused from question to question. So don't worry, we will get to talking about absolutely everything. But until next time, guys, I'm going to love you and leave you. So thank you so much for spending your time with me here today. I hope you all have had a blast with Superman. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. And I'll see you fellow Kryptonians in the next video. Goodbye.